The gunshot echoed through the San Juan mountains like the crack of divine judgment, and Isaac Brennan felt the bullet tear through his shoulder before he heard the sound, dropping him face first into the February snow that had been falling for 3 days straight without mercy. His brother Cyrus stood 15 feet away, the Colt Navy revolver still smoking in his trembling hand, his face twisted into something Isaac barely recognized anymore. They had ridden up here together to check the trap line their father had left them both when he died last autumn, but the argument about selling the ranch had turned vicious the moment they were alone among the pines. Cyrus wanted the money to chase gold in California. Isaac wanted to honor their father's memory and keep the land that 3 generations of Brennans had worked and bled for since 1847. Words became shouts, became threats, and then Cyrus had drawn his gun with wild eyes and pulled the trigger. "I'm sorry," Cyrus said, but he was already backing away, already mounting his horse. "I'm sorry, Isaac. You wouldn't listen. You never listen." Isaac tried to push himself up, tried to speak, but the cold was already seeping into him through the snow. Blood spread dark and hot beneath his coat, melting the white around him into pink slush. He watched Cyrus ride away down the mountain trail, watched until horse and rider disappeared into the curtain of falling snow, and then he was alone with just the wind and the silence that swallowed everything. He didn't know how long he lay there. Time became strange, elastic. The snow kept falling, covering him slowly like a burial shroud. His thoughts drifted to his father, to the ranch house in Glen Rio, New Mexico, where he'd been born 26 years ago, to all the things he'd never get to do. The cold stopped hurting after a while. That scared him more than anything. Then there were voices. Female voices, sharp with concern, cutting through the fog in his mind. "Dear God, there's someone here. Clara, help me." Hands touched him, rolled him over. Isaac forced his eyes open and saw 2 faces hovering above him, both young women bundled in heavy traveling coats. The one who had spoken had auburn hair escaping from beneath her wool hat, green eyes wide with alarm. The other, darker-haired and younger, gasped when she saw all the blood. "He's been shot," the auburn-haired woman said. Her voice was steady despite the shock in her eyes, and Isaac latched onto that steadiness like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. "Clara, bring the wagon closer. We need to get him out of this weather right now." "Lucy, we can't just pick up a stranger who's been shot," the other woman protested. "What if whoever did this is still around? Then we move quickly," Lucy said firmly. She pressed her hand directly against Isaac's wound and he groaned, fresh pain cutting through the numbness. "He's alive, and he won't be for long if we leave him here. Come on." Isaac wanted to tell them about Cyrus, wanted to explain, but his tongue wouldn't work properly. The 2 women half carried, half dragged him through the snow toward a covered wagon he could barely make out through the falling white. Every movement sent lightning bolts of agony through his shoulder and chest. He blacked out somewhere between the snow and the wagon bed. When awareness returned, he was lying on something soft with a blanket over him and the sound of wagon wheels creaking beneath him. The pain in his shoulder had become a living thing, a beast with teeth and claws. Someone had removed his coat and shirt, and he could feel bandages wrapped tight around his torso. "You're awake," the steady voice said. "Lucy." She was sitting beside him in the covered wagon, a blood-stained cloth in her hands. "Don't try to move. The bullet went straight through, which is fortunate, but you've lost a lot of blood." Isaac's mouth was dry as desert sand. "Where?" "We're heading down the mountain toward Durango," Lucy said. "There's a doctor there, or so the last town told us. Can you tell me your name?" "Isaac," he managed. "Isaac Brennan." "Lucy Langford," she said, and there was something in the way she looked at him, direct and unflinching, that made him think she wasn't someone who scared easily. That's my sister Clara driving the wagon. We're heading south from Colorado City toward New Mexico." "Who shot you, Isaac?" The question hit him like a second bullet. Isaac closed his eyes and, to his shame, felt them burn with tears he refused to let fall. "My brother." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had softened. "Your own brother did this to you," we argued. "About our father's ranch. He wanted to sell it. I wouldn't agree." The words came easier now, like poison draining from a wound. "He drew on me. I didn't think he'd actually fire. And then he left me there." He heard Lucy take a sharp breath. "What kind of man leaves his own brother to die in the snow? A desperate one, I guess." Isaac opened his eyes again and studied her face. She was beautiful, he realized, but it was a practical kind of beauty, like someone who had worked hard all her life and never learned to be delicate. Her hands were capable, her gaze clear and intelligent. "Why did you stop? Most people would have kept riding." "Most people aren't decent," Lucy said simply. "My mother raised us to help those in need, and you were definitely in need. Besides, I couldn't live with myself if I'd left you there to freeze." The wagon hit a rut and Isaac gasped as pain flared hot and vicious. Lucy steadied him with a hand on his good shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "Easy. We'll be in Durango by nightfall if this weather holds. Try to rest." But Isaac couldn't rest. He studied Lucy's face as she wrung out the bloody cloth and set it aside, as she checked his bandages with careful fingers, as she pulled the blanket up higher against the cold seeping through the canvas cover. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, he guessed, and there was no wedding ring on her finger. What were two unmarried women doing traveling alone through Colorado territory in the dead of winter? "Why are you heading to New Mexico?" he asked. Lucy glanced at him, surprised. "You should be sleeping, not asking questions." "Can't sleep. Hurts too much. Talk to me. Keeps my mind off it." She sighed but settled back against the wagon side. "My sister and I are going to Glen Rio. Our Aunt Martha owns a boarding house there, and she wrote asking for help after she broke her hip. Clara and I have been working in a hotel in Colorado City, but there was nothing keeping us there permanently, so we packed up and headed south." Isaac's heart jumped despite the pain. "Glen Rio. That's my town. That's where my ranch is." Lucy's eyes widened. "Truly, Martha Langford's boarding house, do you know it? On the east end of town, near the creek. Yellow paint, 2 stories. I know your aunt, she's a good woman." Isaac felt something like hope stirring in his chest for the first time since Cyrus had pulled that trigger. "She makes the best apple pie in 3 territories." "That's her," Lucy said, and she smiled for the first time. A real smile that transformed her whole face and made Isaac's breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with the bullet wound. "She sent us a whole crate of those apples last fall. Clara and I made pie for the hotel guests for weeks." They talked as the wagon rolled down the mountain, as the snow finally began to ease, and the clouds broke apart to reveal a cold blue sky. Isaac learned that Lucy and Clara were originally from Kansas, that their parents had died of scarlet fever 5 years ago, that Lucy had essentially raised her younger sister alone while working whatever job she could find. Clara was 19 now, engaged to a young man who was traveling west separately to find work before they married. Lucy herself had never been engaged, never been courted seriously, too busy keeping them both fed and clothed to worry about romance. "What about you?" Lucy asked as the afternoon light began to fade. "Besides your brother, do you have family?" "It was just me and Cyrus after Pa died last October," Isaac said. The words hurt worse than his shoulder. "Our mother passed when I was 12. Pa built that ranch from nothing, ran cattle and broke horses. Cyrus and I were supposed to do it together after he was gone, but Cyrus never loved the land like I did. He wanted adventure, wanted gold, wanted something more than what we had. "So he shot you for it," Lucy said quietly. "So he shot me for it," Isaac confirmed. "And now he'll probably sell the ranch anyway, take the money and disappear. Everything Pa worked for gone." Lucy was quiet for a moment, her green eyes thoughtful. "Maybe not. You're not dead, Isaac Brennan. You're still alive, and that means you can still fight for what's yours." Something in her voice made Isaac look at her more closely. There was steel beneath the softness, a core of absolute determination that reminded him of his father. Here was a woman who had lost her parents, raised her sister, worked hard jobs in rough towns, and never let the world break her down. Here was a woman who stopped to save a bleeding stranger in a snowstorm instead of protecting herself by riding on. Here was someone worth knowing. "You saved my life," he said. "Yes, well, let's make sure you keep it," Lucy replied briskly, but he saw color rise in her cheeks. "We'll get you to the doctor in Durango, get you properly patched up, and then we'll all head south to Glenrio together. You can deal with your brother and your ranch when you're healed." They reached Durango just after sunset. The doctor, a gray-bearded man named Holloway, cleaned and re-stitched Isaac's wound with hands that smelled of carbolic acid and whiskey. Isaac gritted his teeth through the entire process while Lucy waited outside with Clara. "The bullet had missed anything vital, doctor," Holloway assured him, but he'd lost enough blood to kill a lesser man, and infection was still a serious risk. "You'll need rest and care for at least 2 weeks," the doctor said as he wrapped fresh bandages. "No riding, no heavy work, nothing that could tear those stitches. You have somewhere to recover." Lucy appeared in the doorway before Isaac could answer. "He'll be traveling with us," she said in a tone that brooked no argument. "We'll make sure he rests." Dr. Holloway looked between them with raised eyebrows but nodded. "Keep the wound clean and dry. Change the dressing twice daily. If you see red streaks spreading from the wound or if he develops a fever, find another doctor immediately. That'll be $2. Lucy paid from a small leather purse before Isaac could protest. They helped him back to the wagon, which was now parked in the yard of a small boarding house where the sisters had arranged to spend the night. The proprietress, a Mrs. Chen, who had come west with her husband during the gold rush, took one look at Isaac's pale face and bloodied bandages and immediately offered her spare bedroom. "No man should sleep in a wagon when he's been shot," she declared firmly. "You girls take the room upstairs, and he can have the one down here. No arguments." Isaac was too weak and dizzy to argue even if he'd wanted to. Lucy and Clara helped him to the small bedroom off the kitchen, got him settled on the narrow bed, and Lucy insisted on checking his bandages one more time before she let him rest. "Thank you," Isaac said as she worked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "For all of it. I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Lucy said, but her hands were gentle as they smoothed the fresh bandages. "Just get better, Isaac. That's payment enough." But as she stood to leave, Isaac caught her hand with his good arm. She looked down at him, surprised, and he saw something flicker in her green eyes that matched the strange feeling growing in his own chest. "I mean it," he said. "Thank you, Lucy Langford." She squeezed his hand briefly, and then she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. Isaac lay in the darkness and thought about his brother, about betrayal and blood in the snow, about the ranch he might have lost. But mostly, he thought about a woman with auburn hair and steady hands who had appeared like an angel in the storm and refused to let him die. The next morning, Isaac woke to voices in the kitchen and the smell of frying bacon. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but his head was clearer than it had been since the shooting. He managed to sit up slowly, breathing through the pain, and was trying to figure out how to stand when Lucy appeared with a tray. "You should have called for help," she scolded, but she was smiling. "Dr. Holloway said no unnecessary movement, and that includes trying to get up on your own. Here, eat something. You need your strength back." She'd brought him eggs and bacon, toast with butter, and strong black coffee that tasted like heaven. Isaac ate slowly while Lucy sat in the room's single chair and watched him with that steady, assessing gaze he was coming to recognize. "Clara and I were thinking," she said after a while, "we could stay here another day to let you rest more before we continue south. Mrs. Chen says she doesn't mind." "No," Isaac said immediately. "You've already delayed your journey for me. Your aunt is expecting you, and I'm well enough to travel. Besides, the sooner we get to Glenrio, the sooner I can figure out what Cyrus has done with the ranch." Lucy frowned. "Isaac, you were shot 3 days ago. You're barely on your feet." "I'll be in a wagon, not on my feet," he pointed out. "And I'll have the best nurse in Colorado Territory looking after me." That brought color to her cheeks again, and Isaac felt something warm unfurl in his chest at the sight. "Flattery won't change medical facts," Lucy said primly, but she didn't argue further. They left Durango that afternoon, heading south through the passes toward New Mexico Territory. The weather had cleared, leaving the world blindingly white and painfully bright under a hard blue sky. Isaac lay in the back of the wagon with blankets piled over him, watching Lucy as she sat nearby mending one of Clara's dresses, occasionally checking his bandages or bringing him water from their canteen. Clara drove the wagon most of the time, humming to herself and occasionally calling back questions about the route. She was younger than Lucy, prettier in a conventional way with dark curls and blue eyes, but she lacked her sister's quiet strength. Isaac found himself watching Lucy instead, studying the way she bit her lower lip when she concentrated on her stitching, the way she pushed stray auburn hair back from her face, the way she smiled when she caught him looking at her. "You should rest," she said the third time their eyes met. "I'm resting," Isaac said, "just with my eyes open." "That's not really resting then, is it? Tell me more about Kansas," he said instead of arguing. "What was it like growing up there?" So Lucy told him, her needle flashing in the winter sunlight as she worked. She painted pictures with her words of vast prairies and wheat fields golden under summer sun, of the small farmhouse where she'd been born, of her father who had been a clerk in town, and her mother who had kept the most beautiful flower garden in the county. She spoke of Clara as a child, always laughing and getting into mischief, and of the scarlet fever that had taken both parents within a week of each other in the terrible winter of 1875. "I was 18, Lucy said quietly. "Clara was only 14. We had a little money from selling the house and our father's business, but not much. I knew I had to take care of her, keep us together no matter what. So we went to Kansas City first, then to St. Louis, then kept moving west, taking whatever work we could find. Hotels, restaurants, laundries, sewing. Clara wanted to stop in Colorado City, said it felt like home. We were there almost 2 years before Aunt Martha wrote. "You gave up a lot for your sister," Isaac said. Lucy shrugged without looking up from her mending. "She's my family." "That's what family does." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Isaac thought about Cyrus, about the brother who had shot him and left him to die rather than compromise or share. What would Lucy Langford think of a man whose own blood had betrayed him so completely? "My brother and I used to be close," Isaac said suddenly, surprising himself. "When we were boys, we did everything together, fishing in the creek, riding the horses, helping Pa with the ranch work. I don't know when it changed. Maybe when Ma died, maybe before that. But somewhere along the way, Cyrus started looking at our life like it was a cage instead of a home. Some people are born restless," Lucy said gently. "It doesn't excuse what he did to you, but maybe it explains it. Maybe he felt trapped." So he tried to kill me. Isaac couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. No, that was wrong, and there's no excuse for it, Lucy said firmly. She set down her mending and looked at him directly. Your brother made a choice, Isaac, and it was a terrible choice. But you made a choice, too, to hold on to something you love, to fight for what matters. That takes courage. Didn't feel courageous lying, bleeding in the snow. But you survived it. You're still here, still fighting. That's what courage really is. Isaac held her gaze, and something passed between them that made his pulse quicken. He barely knew this woman, had only been in her company for a handful of days, but he felt drawn to her in a way he'd never experienced before. It wasn't just gratitude for saving his life, though that was part of it. It was something deeper, something that recognized in Lucy Langford a kindred spirit, someone who understood loss and responsibility and the fierce determination to protect what mattered most. The journey south took 6 days. They traveled slowly to accommodate Isaac's injury, stopping early each evening to make camp and rest. Lucy changed his bandages twice a day with gentle efficiency, pleased that the wound was healing clean with no signs of infection. Isaac grew stronger each day, able to sit up longer, to eat more, to move without quite so much pain lancing through his shoulder. They talked for hours as they traveled, and Isaac learned that Lucy loved reading but rarely had time for it, that she could play the piano though she hadn't touched one in years, that she was afraid of spiders but not of bears or mountain lions, that she laughed like sunshine when something truly delighted her. He told her about the ranch, about the horses his father had been famous for breeding, about the red soil of New Mexico, and the way the mesa caught fire with color at sunset, about his dreams of expanding the herd and building something lasting. Clara watched them both with knowing eyes and whispered to her sister when she thought Isaac couldn't hear. Lucy would shush her, but Isaac saw the way color rose in her cheeks and the way she smiled to herself when she thought no one was looking. On the 5th night out from Durango, they camped in a sheltered canyon with good water and grass for the horses. Clara prepared dinner while Lucy helped Isaac walk a bit, his first real exercise since being shot. He was shaky and weak, but it felt good to be on his feet again, to feel his body slowly knitting back together. "You're doing well," Lucy said as they walked slowly along the creek bank, her hand ready to steady him if needed. "Dr. Holloway would be pleased with your progress." "I have a good nurse," Isaac said. "Stop that," Lucy said, but she was smiling. "Stop what? You know what? The flattery. The looking at me like that." Isaac stopped walking and turned to face her, which made him sway a bit until she caught his arm. They stood close together in the fading light, the canyon walls glowing pink and gold around them. "Like what?" he asked softly. Lucy met his eyes, and he saw his own feelings reflected there, the attraction and confusion and something more that neither of them had named yet. "Like you're thinking things you shouldn't be thinking about a woman you've only known 6 days. "Maybe I am," Isaac said. His heart was pounding, and it had nothing to do with exertion or blood loss. "Would that be so terrible?" "I don't know," Lucy whispered. "We're from different worlds, Isaac. Different lives. I'm just passing through, remember? I'm going to Glenrio to help my aunt, and then Clara and I will probably move on again. That's what we do." "Maybe it doesn't have to be," Isaac said. He reached up with his good hand and gently touched her cheek, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Maybe some things are worth staying for. Lucy's breath caught, and for a moment, Isaac thought she might close the distance between them. But then Clara called from the campfire that dinner was ready, and the moment broke. Lucy stepped back, her cheeks flushed, and turned toward camp without a word. Isaac followed more slowly, his shoulder aching from the walk and his heart aching from something else entirely. He knew he was falling for Lucy Langford, knew it with a certainty that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. But what if she was right? What if she wasn't meant to stay? What if he was just a man she'd saved out of kindness, nothing more? But that night, as they sat around the fire after dinner, Lucy caught his eye across the flames and smiled, and Isaac saw the truth written plainly in her face. She was falling too, whether she wanted to admit it or not. They reached Glenrio on a cold afternoon in late February, the town appearing like a promise on the horizon after miles of scrubland and red earth. Isaac directed them through the main street, past the general store and the saloon and the church, until they reached the yellow boarding house at the east end near the creek. Aunt Martha came bustling out before they'd even stopped the wagon, her hip clearly healed enough to walk though she leaned on a cane. She was a stout woman in her 50s with Lucy's green eyes and a smile that could warm a winter day. "Lucy, Clara, oh my girls, you made it." She pulled both sisters into fierce hugs, then noticed Isaac slowly climbing down from the wagon. "And who's this you've brought with you? Merciful heavens, is that Isaac Brennan? Boy, what happened to you?" "It's a long story, Martha," Isaac said, accepting her careful hug with his good arm. "Your nieces saved my life up in the mountains. I owe them everything." Martha looked between Isaac and Lucy with sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. "Well, come inside, all of you. You look like you could use hot food and warm beds. Isaac, does your brother know you're back?" "I heard Cyrus returned about a week ago with some wild story about you staying up at the trapline camp to wait out the weather." Isaac's blood ran cold. "Cyrus is here. In Glenrio." "Was here," Martha said. "He sold the ranch to Walter Thompson 3 days ago and headed west with the money. Said you'd agreed to it, that you wanted to seek your fortune elsewhere and were giving him power to handle the sale. I thought it was strange at the time, but Isaac, what's wrong? You've gone white as a sheet." Isaac swayed, and Lucy was instantly at his side, supporting him. "Inside," she said firmly. "Right now." They got him into the boarding house parlor and settled in a chair before his legs could give out. Rage and despair warred in Isaac's chest, making it hard to breathe. Cyrus had done it. Had shot him, left him for dead, and then sold their father's ranch out from under him while lying about having permission. The betrayal was complete. "Tell me what really happened," Martha demanded, and her voice had gone steel hard. "Isaac Brennan, you tell me the truth right now." So Isaac told her, told all of them, the whole sorry story from the argument in the mountains to the gunshot to Lucy finding him bleeding in the snow. Martha's face grew darker with each sentence, and by the end she was gripping her cane so hard her knuckles showed white. "That miserable, worthless excuse for a man," she hissed. "To shoot his own brother, to lie to the whole town. I'll see him hang for this." "He's already gone," Isaac said dully, "and he has the money from the ranch. Even if we could find him, even if we could prove what he did, the sale is done. Thompson has the deed. My father's ranch is gone." "No, it isn't," Lucy said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing very straight, her chin lifted in determination. "A deed obtained through fraud isn't legal. Isaac, you were unconscious and dying while your brother sold your property. He had no legal authority to act on your behalf, especially since he's the one who shot you. Any lawyer could challenge that sale." Isaac stared at her. "I don't have money for a lawyer. Cyrus took it all." "But you have witnesses," Lucy persisted. "You have me and Clara, who found you shot and can testify to your injuries and condition. You have Dr. Holloway in Durango, who treated your gunshot wound and can document when it happened. You have your neighbors here who can testify about Cyrus's lies. Isaac, you have a case." Hope, dangerous and fragile, kindled in Isaac's chest. "Do you really think it could work?" "I think it's worth trying," Lucy said fiercely. I think your father's legacy is worth fighting for, and I think you deserve justice for what your brother did to you." Martha was nodding vigorously. "Lucy's right. My late husband knew some law before he passed, and what she's saying makes sense. We need to talk to Judge Hastings. He holds court here twice a month, and he's a fair man. If anyone can help you, it's him." "When does he next come to Glenrio?" Isaac asked. "Week after next," Martha said, "which gives us time to gather evidence and prepare. In the meantime, Isaac, you'll stay here while you finish recovering. Lucy and Clara, you'll stay here too, of course. We have plenty of room, and I can use the help around the place with my hip still being troublesome." Over the next 2 weeks, Isaac slowly regained his strength while Lucy and Clara helped Martha run the boarding house. Isaac discovered that Lucy was an excellent cook, that she sang softly to herself while working, that she was patient with the boarding house guests, and kind to everyone who crossed her path. He also discovered that he looked for her constantly, that his day felt incomplete if he didn't see her smile, that his heart lifted every time she checked his healing shoulder with those gentle, capable hands. They fell into a routine. Lucy would change his bandages each morning and evening, and they would talk, really talk about everything and nothing. Isaac told her about his childhood on the ranch, about the best horse his father ever bred, about his dreams for the future. Lucy told him about the places she and Clara had lived, about the jobs she'd worked, about the books she'd loved, and the life she'd imagined for herself before her parents died. One evening, as Lucy was rewrapping his shoulder after washing the wound, Isaac caught her hand. She looked up at him, surprised. "I'm falling in love with you," Isaac said quietly. "I know it's fast, I know it probably doesn't make sense, but it's true and I needed you to know." Lucy's eyes went wide and for a moment she didn't breathe. Then she said very softly, "I know. I'm falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I don't know how to stay," Lucy whispered. "I've spent 5 years moving from place to place, never putting down roots, always ready to pack up and go. I don't know how to be anything else." Isaac used his good hand to gently tilt her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "Then let me teach you. Stay here, Lucy, in Glenrio with me. Help me fight for the ranch, and if we win, help me build something lasting. Be my partner, my love, my everything. Stay." Tears glistened in Lucy's eyes. "What if we can't get the ranch back? What if the judge rules against you?" "Then we'll figure something else out together," Isaac said. "I don't care about the ranch as much as I care about you. If I have you, I have everything that matters." Lucy let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was kissing him, careful of his injured shoulder but fierce in her emotion. Isaac wrapped his good arm around her and kissed her back with everything he had, all the love and gratitude and hope he'd been carrying since she found him dying in the snow. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucy was smiling through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it." Isaac felt like his heart might burst from joy. "I don't have a ring. I don't have anything to give you right now except promises." "Your promises are enough," Lucy said and kissed him again. Judge Hastings arrived in Glenrio on the first Monday in March, a stern man with white whiskers and sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. Isaac, with Lucy beside him for support, presented his case in Martha's parlor since the judge was staying at the boarding house. Isaac told the whole story, not sparing himself or his brother. Lucy and Clara testified to finding him shot and bleeding, to the severity of his wounds, to his statements about what had happened. Martha provided a written statement from Dr. Holloway confirming the gunshot wound and its timing. Several of Isaac's neighbors testified that Cyrus had seemed nervous and rushed when he sold the ranch, that he'd insisted on a quick sale and left town immediately after. Judge Hastings listened to everything, asked pointed questions, reviewed the documents, and then sat back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Thompson," he said to the rancher who had bought the Brennan property and who sat in the corner looking increasingly uncomfortable, "did Cyrus Brennan provide any written authorization from his brother regarding this sale?" Walter Thompson, a weathered man in his 50s who had ranched successfully in New Mexico for 20 years, shook his head. "No, sir. He just said they'd talked about it and Isaac had agreed. I had no reason to doubt him. The Brennans were known as honest folk." "We're being the operative word," the judge said dryly. He turned back to Isaac. "Son, your case is clear. Your brother attempted to murder you and then fraudulently sold your property while you lay dying. Any deed obtained under such circumstances is null and void. I'm ruling that the sale between Cyrus Brennan and Walter Thompson is invalid, and the ranch reverts to you as the rightful owner." Relief flooded through Isaac so powerfully he felt dizzy. Lucy squeezed his hand hard. "However," Judge Hastings continued, turning to Thompson, "you entered into this transaction in good faith and paid a fair price. Mr. Brennan, you'll need to reimburse Mr. Thompson the amount he paid for the property." Isaac's heart sank. "Your Honor, I don't have that money. My brother took everything when he fled." The judge frowned, considering. Walter Thompson stood up, looking uncomfortable but resigned. "If I may, Your Honor, I have a proposal. Young Brennan, I don't want to see you lose your father's ranch because your brother was a thieving coward. What if we work out a payment plan? You pay me back over time, say 5 years, with fair interest. That way you keep the ranch, I get my money eventually, and justice is served." Isaac stared at the older rancher in amazement. "You do that, even though you're losing the property you paid for?" Thompson shrugged. "Your father, John, was a good man and a good neighbor. He helped me out more than once over the years. Consider it repaying that debt. Besides, something about that brother of yours rubbed me wrong from the start. I should have listened to my gut." "I accept," Isaac said immediately. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'll pay you back every cent, I swear it." Judge Hastings nodded approvingly. "Then it's settled. I'll draw up the paperwork making this official. Isaac Brennan, the ranch is yours again. Use it well. And if you ever find your brother, I suggest you press charges for attempted murder. That man belongs in a jail cell." When everyone had left and it was just Isaac, Lucy, Clara, and Martha in the parlor, Isaac pulled Lucy into a careful embrace, mindful of his still healing shoulder. "We did it," he said into her hair. "The ranch is mine again, our ranch if you'll still have me." Lucy pulled back just enough to look up at him with shining eyes. "Our ranch," she agreed. "I like the sound of that." Clara cleared her throat delicately. "So should I start planning a wedding, or are you two going to make me wait?" Isaac laughed, and Lucy blushed scarlet. "Soon," Isaac promised, looking at Lucy. "As soon as the circuit preacher comes through town, if Lucy's willing." "I'm willing," Lucy said, and the smile on her face was brighter than the New Mexico sun. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Glenrio, on a spring morning when the desert bloomed with wildflowers and the sky stretched blue and endless overhead. Lucy wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had altered from her own wedding gown, and Isaac wore his father's best suit that still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and leather. Clara stood up as maid of honor, and Walter Thompson served as best man at Isaac's request, a gesture of gratitude the older rancher accepted with gruff pleasure. Martha cried through the entire ceremony, happy tears that she didn't bother trying to hide. Half of Glenrio turned out to witness the wedding, curious about the woman who had saved Isaac Brennan's life and captured his heart. They found Lucy charming and kind, with a ready smile and a firm handshake, and they decided she'd make an excellent rancher's wife. The ranch itself needed work after sitting empty for weeks, but Isaac and Lucy threw themselves into the task with determination. They repaired fences, rounded up scattered cattle, cleaned out the barn and the house. Clara stayed on at Martha's boarding house, working there while her fiancé traveled toward New Mexico to join her. Martha proved to be a godsend, helping with preserves and advice and stories about Isaac's father that made Lucy feel connected to the land and the legacy she was now part of. Isaac's shoulder healed completely by midsummer, though it ached before storms for the rest of his life. He never heard from Cyrus again, though stories occasionally drifted back of a man matching his description who had lost everything in a California poker game and was last seen working in a Sierra Nevada mining camp. Isaac tried to feel sorry for his brother but couldn't quite manage it. Some betrayals cut too deep. Lucy transformed the ranch house into a home with her presence. She planted a vegetable garden and flowers by the front door. She sewed curtains for the windows and cooked meals that reminded Isaac of his mother's cooking. She worked beside him during the day, herding cattle and breaking horses with a natural skill that surprised them both, and fell into his arms at night with a passion that made Isaac thank God daily for the storm that had brought her into his life. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with the kind of attention that comes from real love. Isaac learned that Lucy was afraid of thunderstorms because one had killed their neighbor's whole family when she was a child. Lucy learned that Isaac sometimes woke from nightmares about lying bleeding in the snow, and she would hold him until he remembered he was safe and whole and loved. They learned to work together, to fight fair when they disagreed, to build something stronger than either of them could have built alone. Clara married her young man, a carpenter named James, in the autumn, and they settled in Glen Rio as well, building a small house near Martha's boarding house. The sisters remained close, visiting often, and Isaac came to love Clara like the sister he'd never had. Martha thrived with her nieces nearby, her boarding house becoming one of the most popular stops for travelers passing through New Mexico territory. Isaac made his first payment to Walter Thompson that fall and never missed one after that, paying the older rancher back with interest exactly as promised. Thompson became a good friend and mentor, teaching Isaac techniques for breeding and selling horses that John Brennan had never shared. The ranch began to prosper under Isaac and Lucy's joint management, gaining a reputation for quality stock and fair dealing. Lucy discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1881, almost exactly a year after their wedding. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mesa red and gold, and he kissed her with such joy and reverence that she laughed through happy tears. Their first child was a boy, born in January 1882, during a cold snap that reminded them both of the day they met. They named him John after Isaac's father, and he had Lucy's green eyes and Isaac's dark hair. Isaac held his son for the first time and thought about his own father, about legacy and family, and the things worth fighting for. John Brennan had built this ranch from nothing. Isaac and Lucy would make it thrive and pass it on to their children, a gift earned through love and sacrifice, and the courage to hope even when hope seemed foolish. Lucy proved to be a natural mother, patient and playful and fiercely protective. Isaac watched her sing lullabies to their son and thought his heart might explode from love. They had survived betrayal and violence and near death. They had fought for their future and won. Now they got to enjoy the fruits of that victory, and Isaac vowed he would never take a single moment for granted. Young John was barely walking when Lucy became pregnant again, and their daughter Margaret arrived in the autumn of 1883, squalling and red-faced and perfect. She had her mother's auburn hair and her father's stubborn chin, and she wrapped Isaac around her tiny finger from the first moment he held her. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and joy. Isaac expanded the ranch, buying additional land as their success grew. Lucy kept the books and managed the household, proving to have a head for numbers that put Isaac's rough accounting to shame. They hired hands during busy seasons, and Lucy insisted on treating them fairly, paying good wages and providing decent quarters. The ranch developed a reputation as a good place to work, and they never lacked for skilled help. Clara and James had children of their own, 3 daughters in quick succession, who became inseparable friends with John and Margaret. Martha watched her extended family grow with deep satisfaction, declaring often that she had been right to write to her nieces asking for help. That letter had brought Lucy to New Mexico, had led to Isaac's rescue, had created this whole beautiful future. Isaac and Lucy had one more child, a second son they named Thomas, born in 1886 when Lucy was 29 and Isaac was 32. He was a quiet baby who grew into a thoughtful boy, content to watch and learn before acting. The 3 children filled the ranch house with laughter and chaos and love, and Isaac sometimes had to pinch himself to believe this was really his life. On cold winter nights, when snow fell on the New Mexico high country, Isaac would sometimes remember lying in the snow waiting to die, his brother's betrayal fresh and burning. Then he would look at Lucy reading to the children by the fireplace, or laughing at something Margaret said, or meeting his eyes across the room with a smile that still made his heart race after all these years, and he would thank God for that betrayal. Because without it, he never would have been in those mountains. Lucy never would have found him. They never would have built this life together. He told her that once, on their 10th wedding anniversary in 1891, and Lucy had kissed him and said she understood completely. Her parents' deaths had been the worst thing that ever happened to her, but they had set her on the path that led to Isaac. Sometimes, she said, God wrote straight with crooked lines. Their love had been born from tragedy, but it was real and true and lasting nonetheless. The ranch continued to prosper through the 1890s. Isaac's horses became famous throughout New Mexico territory and beyond for their quality and temperament. Lucy established a small school on the ranch property for their children and the children of their workers, hiring a teacher and ensuring everyone received education. She remembered too well how her own education had been cut short by necessity, and she was determined to give the next generation better opportunities. John Brennan grew into a capable young man with his father's love for the land and his mother's strategic mind. Margaret proved to have a talent for working with horses that exceeded even Isaac's abilities, and she could gentle a wild Mustang faster than any hand they employed. Thomas, their youngest, showed an aptitude for drawing and art, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the ranch and the New Mexico landscape. Isaac and Lucy encouraged all 3 children to follow their passions while teaching them the value of hard work and integrity. Walter Thompson passed away in 1895, and Isaac served as a pallbearer at his funeral, forever grateful to the man who had given him a second chance at keeping his father's ranch. In his will, Thompson left a small piece of land adjoining the Brennan property to Isaac and Lucy, a final gift from a good neighbor and friend. Martha lived to see her 80th birthday in 1900, surrounded by nieces and grandnieces and grandnephews, and the extended family she had helped create with one letter asking for help. She passed peacefully in her sleep that winter, and they buried her in the Glen Rio Cemetery next to her late husband. Lucy grieved deeply for the aunt who had been her last link to her parents, but she took comfort in knowing Martha had lived to see her so happy and settled. Clara and James remained close friends and neighbors for the rest of their lives. The sisters never lost the bond forged during their years of struggle, and their children grew up more like siblings than cousins. When New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, the whole extended family celebrated together, proud to be part of the state's history and future. Isaac and Lucy grew old together on the ranch, watching their children grow and marry and have children of their own. John took over primary management of the ranch in 1910, when Isaac was 56 and ready to step back from the hardest physical work. Margaret married a horse trainer from Texas, and they established their own breeding operation with Isaac and Lucy's blessing and financial help. Thomas went east to study art, but always came home for summers and holidays, and eventually returned permanently to document the changing West through his paintings. On winter evenings, when their grandchildren came to visit, Isaac and Lucy would sit by the fire and tell stories about the old days. The children loved hearing about how their grandmother had saved their grandfather's life in a snowstorm, how she had found him bleeding and dying and refused to let him go. They would sit wide-eyed as Lucy described the journey to Durango, the fight to reclaim the ranch, the wedding under the New Mexico sky. "Did you know right away that Grandma was special?" one of the grandchildren asked Isaac once. Isaac looked at Lucy, who sat beside him with her hand in his, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her green eyes still as clear and steady as the day she found him. "Not right away," he said honestly, "but by the time we reached Durango, I knew my life had changed forever. And by the time we reached Glen Rio, I knew I loved her and always would." "What about you, Grandma?" another grandchild asked. "When did you know you loved Grandpa?" Lucy smiled, that smile Isaac had fallen in love with 40 years ago and still loved just as much. "When he told me he was fighting for something he loved, even though it had cost him everything. That's when I knew he was special. And when he asked me to stay to build something with him, I knew I'd found my home." They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1931, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, by friends and neighbors and community members whose lives they had touched. The ranch was still thriving under John's management, its reputation stronger than ever. Isaac was 77, Lucy 73, and they had lived to see automobiles and electricity and airplanes, to see the world change in ways they never could have imagined when they first met in that Colorado mountain snowstorm. That night, after all the guests had gone home and they lay in bed together in the house they had shared for half a century, Lucy turned to Isaac in the darkness. "No regrets?" she asked softly. Isaac pulled her close, careful of their aging bodies, and kissed her forehead. "Not a single one. You saved me, Lucy. Not just my life that day in the snow, but my whole future. Everything good in my life came from you." "We saved each other," Lucy corrected gently. "You gave me a home when I didn't know I needed one. You taught me it was okay to stop running and put down roots. You showed me what real love looks like." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the New Mexico wind whisper around the house. Isaac thought about his brother sometimes, wondered if Cyrus had ever found what he was looking for, if he had ever regretted his choices. But mostly he felt grateful. Grateful for a snowstorm that forced Lucy to take the mountain route. Grateful that she and Clara had been the kind of people who stopped to help a stranger. Grateful for every single day he had been given with this remarkable woman. Isaac Brennan passed away peacefully in 1934 at the age of 80, with Lucy holding his hand and his children gathered around him. His last words were to tell Lucy he loved her and to thank her for the beautiful life they had built together. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mesa and the red earth he had loved so much. Lucy lived 3 more years, surrounded by family, still sharp-minded and beloved by everyone who knew her. She spent her final years writing down the family history, ensuring that future generations would know the story of how their grandfather had been shot by his brother and left to die in the snow, and how their grandmother had saved him and loved him and built an empire with him from the ashes of betrayal. On her deathbed in 1937, at the age of 79, Lucy looked at her children and grandchildren gathered around and smiled. "I've had the most wonderful life," she said clearly. "Tell your children and their children that love is real, that it's worth fighting for, that it can come from the most unexpected places. Your grandfather and I proved that. We found each other in a snowstorm when we both needed saving, and we saved each other every day after that." They buried her next to Isaac on that hill overlooking the ranch, 2 headstones side by side marking the resting place of Isaac and Lucy Brennan. The ranch continued to thrive under their descendants' care, and the story of how Isaac and Lucy met became family legend, told and retold through the generations, because it was a story worth telling, worth remembering. A story about betrayal and survival, about a woman brave enough to stop and help a dying stranger, about a man who fought for what he loved even when everything seemed lost. Most of all, it was a story about love that transformed 2 damaged people into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have been alone. The ranch still stands today, still in the Brennan family, still producing quality horses and cattle on New Mexico soil. And on clear winter days, when snow falls in the distant mountains, the Brennans remember their ancestors and the extraordinary love that began with a gunshot and a snowstorm, and a woman who refused to ride past a bleeding man in the snow. Some things are worth stopping for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. Isaac and Lucy Brennan had proved that, and their legacy lived on in the land they loved, and the family they created, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and enduring love in the wild and beautiful American West.